Hey everyone, today we're going to be going over The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This is going to be my review of the film and just talking about some things that I love about the movie. This movie, one of the best things about it is the fact that it set the stage for what fantasy movies could be. Um, the vision and the execution of everything that they were able to achieve with this movie was just really astounding. Um, the action shots have just so much presence to them. This is one of the movies that just has basically everything. It has action, adventure, comedy, drama, romance. It's one of those movies that really anybody could fall in love with it, and that's obviously why so many people are in love with this movie. At this point, we are currently in the Shire, which is one of my favorite parts about the movie. Uh, it just feels like so relaxing, the Shire, and it really captures the essence of home. Um, Throughout the series, they're basically essentially trying to protect all of Middle Earth, but obviously the hobbits are most interested in obviously keeping the Shire safe, and obviously for good reason. It's just such a beautiful, relaxing place. One of my other favorite things about the movie is the inner turmoil of Bilbo, having had now dealt with the ring for so long and the burden that it's caused him. It's a really interesting aspect to his character. It's also really interesting how they carried that same inner turmoil and the heavy burden of what the ring can cause people and other living creatures to go through. Obviously, it's not just humans that are affected by it. The hobbits are pretty strongly affected by it, as you can see with what happened to uh, Bilbo, what happened to Frodo, and then what originally happened to Smeagol, which they don't really touch on it a whole lot. I mean, it is like presented with what has happened to Smeagol. Obviously, the ring has warped him so heavily that he's now uh, basically a completely new character. I mean, obviously, throughout the series, they showcase the fact that Smeagol and Gollum are essentially two split personalities. Smeagol being his original, like, innocent self, and then Gollum now being the version of him that's been warped by the ring. But it's really interesting to showcase those inner turmoils and struggles just simply by the evil that's imbued by the ring. So I really like throughout the series how heavily they imply that this is just a massive burden on anybody who should ever wield it. One of my favorite things too is Gandalf's reaction to the ring. I mean, you can obviously see that he's tempted by it, and he obviously doesn't succumb to that temptation. And if anything, he rejects the temptation whenever Frodo offers him the ring, saying that he should take it. Obviously, Gandalf says that he would want to use the ring for good, but through him, it would be such a powerful force that obviously it would likely like destroy Middle Earth. Which is, yeah, one of my favorite things about this movie as a whole is how heavily they rely on the power of the ring, which I know it's obviously a given, but yeah, it's just something that I think is really the backbone of the movie and why it weighs so heavily. Because, I mean, obviously, from a fantasy point, having something like that is really powerful, but it also ties into real life situations where the overall basically struggle of something like this is obviously just almost an allegory for temptation in the first place. Um, this is something that kind of ties into basically the debate over whether evil is like imbued in people or whether it's like sought out um, or if it's just something that exists that people are kind of tapped into. Um, but this movie really presents an interesting like thought experiment of having like a representation for something that would be tempting. So obviously in real life, there's not just any one single thing that is as tempting as the ring and can basically lead people down the path of evil. But there are a lot of things in our real world that could allow people to go down that path. So I think that it's really interesting how it taps into the real life temptations that people deal with on a daily basis. Um, yeah, it's one of my favorite things about the film. So right now we're dealing with the fact that basically Aragorn is presented with the fact that obviously his ancestors are the kings of Gondor, and he has basically refused to take up that helm. So this is another thing where basically throughout the series he's not explicitly tempted by the ring. I mean, he gives a few like basically looks as though you can see that there's some stirring within him, and obviously that's going to happen because it seems like men are the most easily persuaded by this thing. So the fact that Aragorn could easily take up being the king of Gondor and have all that power, and he is refusing to do that, says a lot about his character. And he's one of my favorite characters throughout this whole series, which ties into another of my favorite parts about this movie is just all of the characters. I mean, they're all really great. There's not any one single character that I would even consider my favorite. I mean, as time has gone on and the more and more I watch this movie, I sometimes have feelings of like certain characters being my favorite. Like Pippin started out as my favorite whenever I was a kid, along with Legolas. Frodo has been my favorite at some points. Gandalf, Aragorn. But it really says a lot about this movie, the fact that there's no any one individual character who like truly shines above the rest. And that's one of the best parts about it, the fact that it is the Fellowship. All of the Fellowship members really are, they can stand on their own as just being really quality characters. None of them are really like, uh, none of them are weak. None of them are basically taking second stage to any of the others. All of them are as important as the others. I mean, I know that throughout this movie and throughout the others that Frodo essentially bears the biggest burden, but without any of the other members, I don't think that the mission would have been a complete success. So they're all really necessary and they're all interesting, very entertaining, pulling on your heartstrings at certain points. And yeah, I think that just speaks volumes about how quality these characters were portrayed in this film. So yeah, that's one of my favorite things. Another one of my favorite things is the setting of this movie. Everything just makes you feel like you want to be there. I mean, I know that obviously a lot of the movie is set in a dangerous landscape. So obviously parts of the, like being in like Mordor, obviously you wouldn't necessarily want to be there. But with that being said, it still looks so cool, like with Mountain Doom and everything. Yeah, just everything about it, and especially like the beautiful green landscapes of the movie, which obviously everything was filmed in New Zealand, and that again just speaks volumes for just how beautiful the natural landscape is in New Zealand, and how essentially they were able to portray something like a fantasy film in this real life place, but it still feel fantasy. It almost feels like somewhere like New Zealand is almost like pulled straight out of a book and then portrayed in Earth, which was a crazy thing to think about, but that's how I feel about it. Um, yeah, another one of my favorite characters is Saruman. It's really interesting his approach to the conflict in the movie. Essentially, he feels as though like the whole line of thought of if you can't beat them, then join them. I know that obviously I'm sure on some level he's been tempted by the power of Sauron and everything, so I don't think that it's just him completely willingly turning over to the side of evil, but I think that he also realizes the power that Sauron and Mordor have and realizes that they're likely not going to beat them, so they may as well join them. So that's a really interesting thing, showing the inner conflict in him. And yeah, it was a great portrayal of Saruman. He's just he's such a menacing figure, but on the same hand, he's honestly like pretty likable. I think that's probably based on the fact that wizards are just really cool. No matter what movie it is, a lot of times the wizards are some of the best characters in the movies just because they have this obviously just magic power, and a lot of times they're just really cool, really interesting characters, and Saruman is definitely not excluded from that list. And I have so much respect for the way that Frodo turns out in the end, where he basically takes it upon himself to go ahead and try and deliver the ring by himself, which obviously Sam joins him, but the fact that Frodo in the first place was even willing to take it by himself speaks volumes about how much respect you have for him and how willing he is to go the distance in order to make sure that the mission is actually completed. But yeah, it's just a great movie.